Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, amazing people all around the world of crypto and blockchain. And today I have another amazing guest. He is the Chief Technology Officer at Centrifuge. His name is Jeroen Offerijns. Jeroen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining me, and this is going to be great. So let's kick things off. I'll ask you first. The first question I ask everybody is, what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, my background is in software engineering. I grew up as a kid like tinkering around with computers and learning programming like at a pretty young age and kind of discovering that as a pretty exciting way to build things, build products. And got really motivated by that and started doing that in late primary school, early high school, kind of all throughout my university years. And so I moved into like Web2, pretty traditional software engineering roles, where I learned a lot about like the technical skills, but also saw a lot of like how innovations a lot of the Web2, especially financial software was. So I got quite involved in that from like a technical perspective, but not yet from like a Web3 perspective. I joined crypto a little bit later, about 5 or 6 years ago at this point, when I got involved with Centrifuge and pretty quickly realized that what I saw as like the technical benefits of crypto and blockchain was being utilized really well in this project. And we could talk about that much more, but I think it just all fit together really well. And so my background, my technical skills, my engineering skills were able to kind of help take this project to the next level.
Awesome. Awesome. So I do want to find out the technical part of Centrifuge, but I want to find out, what Centrifuge is all about, including your role, your mission, and focus and vision.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, we've been around for quite a long time, about 7 years at this point, and what we've always focused on is looking at what do you have in crypto? What is the technology? What does it enable? But then how do you bring that for like to a real world and to real use cases, right? And so that's why we originally coined this term RWAs or real world assets. Is we're just looking at crypto in 2017, 2018, 2019, and it was all kind of a very separate like world on its own. And we were thinking about like how can you bring these two worlds together? And so our mission is really to reimagine finance and build it from the ground up in a way that is more efficient, more transparent, and more automated. And if you look at finance today, it's obviously a huge industry with lots of major players, lots of institutions, and a lot of innovations in the last few years already. But the core system, like really the lower level, the backend, hasn't really changed. And so that means it's still limited in terms of how quickly you can innovate. And so we really think you need to rethink that entire financial system and rebuild it on crypto rails. And so that's what we're ultimately trying to do.
Great. So reimagination is important. So you recently launched something that is really, I think was imaginative. It's called the RWA Launchpad. What's that all about, and why will that be a game changer for developers who are building, institutional grade products on chain?
Yeah, I mean it's something I'm really excited about, right? So I think the market of RWAs has developed a lot over the last few years. I think 4 years ago we were trying to explain to people why RWAs made sense and why it was something that people should care about. Now we're in the space where BlackRock is saying everything is going to be tokenized, and we're launching funds that are hundreds of millions of dollars together with Maker. There's so much growth in the space, and what you start to see happening is right, like a lot of people are getting involved with RWAs, and a lot of people are getting involved with like tokenization. But the technology is not really hasn't really been ready for it. What I mean by that is right, like if you think about if you wanted to launch an NFT a few years ago in the whole kind of NFT boom, like everyone wouldn't, like most people wouldn't build their own NFT token. What they would do is they would use some other project to launch their NFT project. And so that's very different from what you see now with RWAs. It's basically every RWA project is building their own custom code and building everything from scratch, which just means a lot of redundant work and a lot of like it's very inefficient, but it's also very risky because it means people doing the same thing over and over again, which in crypto, right? Like we all know how common hacks are, and it's just not a very scalable way to rebuild finance ultimately. So what we're doing with RWA Launchpad is really building this toolkit that allows anyone who wants to launch an RWA product to kind of take these different extensions, like RWA, we call them RWA extensions, and combine them to launch your own product. Right? So you can imagine like maybe you want to launch like a tokenized treasury funds, and you would combine the KYC smart contract with tokenization of the T-bills with an Oracle for this and so on. Or maybe you want to launch a private credit offering and you want to have on-chain NAV and like all of these are other different options. So really we're building this toolkit, this platform that allows someone to come in and say, this is what I want to do, these are the tools that I want to use, the extensions I want to use, and then go to market a lot faster, built on the secure foundation that Centrifuge has already built and learned from over the last few years.
Great. So the benefits, there are probably a lot of benefits, but I want to see in your words, what do you feel the benefits of the platform is?
I would say number one, it's being able to go to market faster. Like you can launch an RWA product in days or weeks rather than months or years. Number two, it's security, which is incredibly important in this space. You don't want to launch code super quickly and then get hacked and lose users' money, right? And then three, I would say it's scalability. It's a foundation that allows you to scale an institutional grade product to billions of dollars in TVL, rather than be limited by your own custom code.
Very cool. So I get confused. You know, I've been in crypto since 2017, and recently I've been confused. You mentioned earlier that you're looking to reinvent finance, right? When you're tokenizing stocks and bonds and stuff like that from BlackRock from the traditional world, it's not really a reinvention, right? It's more of an extension into blockchain into crypto, right? Where do you do all the restrictions? What still needs to be reinvented, and why are we bringing the traditional world into crypto with just the innovation of RWAs? What still needs to be reinvented?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very good question, right? So I think we need to realize that like rebuilding finance is not going to happen in even 5 years. It's a very long-term project. And I think it's something that a lot of people in DeFi have been working together already for quite a long time. And like, I mean, we've come a long way since 2017, I would say, but there's still a long way to go as well. Like that's, I mean, it really is a marathon, not a sprint. And so we need to figure out like, what is the end goal? What do we want to get to? Which I think a lot of us are pretty aligned on. And then what is it that we can do today? And it's not the same thing, right? So if you think about T-bills, as the BlackRock fund, for example, like it's not realistic for the US government to be tokenizing treasuries directly on Ethereum yet. They're just not going to do that. That's going to take a little bit longer. I hope it's going to happen. I think it's eventually going to happen. It's more of a question of like 5 or 15 years, I would say, but it's going to happen. But we're not there yet, right? So today, to run a fund that buys and sells T-bills, you basically need to on-ramp the stablecoins and then like run a fund off-chain in the traditional way. You still have a lot of benefits, right? You get a token that is easily tradable in DeFi, that is much more accessible to people to buy. It's much more transparency. So I think it's still a lot already like an incremental improvement over traditional finance, but it's maybe not the exponential step we are. It's one step in that direction. I think it's really exciting though, as you start to look beyond T-bills, and I think that's where the market is now starting to get to, is like what are the next assets that we're starting to tokenize, and what can we do there to like go a little bit further, right? So I think if you think about, for example, private credit, what could be really interesting is like tokenizing individual private credit loans, and then creating a fund that represents like a portfolio of those loans. And what you get then is like each individual loan is actually directly on chain and tokenized. And then the fund is the token that's basically tradable in DeFi. And so that's maybe one of the like next steps in like the evolution of this whole process. So I think there's a lot of steps like that we need to take. And like we also need to realize that for this to be successful, we need to work with all of these major institutions to start entering the crypto space. And I think you see a lot of excitement, a lot of adoption from that side. Like really, any institution we talk to, they're motivated to be part of this movement. But they're also generally risk averse. They have a lot of backgrounds in how they do things today. And so it takes them a little while. And so you're telling them, look, you need to start over from scratch. It's not going to work. So we need to figure out like ways to work with them and help them like take baby steps before we get to the final North Star.
What is the North Star again? For people who don't know or should know, what is that? What is that North Star?
I think it's every person and business on this world directly being able to interact with the financial system on blockchain rails and have this like to the point that any individual person or any small business has the same access to capital and the same access to financial markets as any major corporation. I think that's a really good way to like captivate or like capture the end goal, which is that today we have this opaque financial system that works really well for some, but not as good for others. And I think if we can get to a point where it's so accessible and so open that everybody has the same access to this market, I mean, that's really, I would say, mission accomplished.
Yeah, I see that too. I think that's a good goal, a great goal, a fantastic goal, actually. So I want to look at institutions first. We want to get them on Web3, right? Why it might be something else, but why would RWAs be the best chance to achieve institutional Web3 adoption?
I think it's a combination of a few things, right? So one, we talk about rebuilding, we talk about like reimagining, but the reality is there's also a lot to learn from traditional finance. There is decades or centuries in many ways, right, like of experience. And I think a lot of people in crypto have like this experience with the technology and the ecosystem, but don't necessarily have like all of that like experience with like financial markets and like all the lessons that have been learned there. So I think RWAs are kind of a great place for us to work together with institutions and really combine the best of both worlds, right? If you think about like funds that we are running today on Centrifuge, this technology is doing a big chunk, and like we're able to like really help and make meaningful progress there. But the institutions are bringing like the experience with how do you run a fund like this, how do you manage assets, how do you do all of these like things that they're very good at is really what they focus on and specialize in. And so I think RWAs are the way that institutions can leverage what they're already good at and bring that expertise to the crypto ecosystem. So I think that's really like number one. I think number two is institutions really see this as solving a problem for them. Right? Like if you think about like Larry Fink talking about like every asset will be tokenized, the reason for that is because he realizes how financial markets today, although they can be quite efficient in some parts, they're really pretty inefficient in many other parts as well. And we kind of come back to, right, like think about trading stocks, equity. It's pretty easy. Anyone can go and like sign up for a broker and like buy Google stock today at a pretty low fee. That's fine. But think about private credit or think about more complex fixed income products or think about commodities or other kinds of like parts of the financial markets. Generally, those are a lot harder to access. Generally, the fees are much higher. And so from an institutional perspective, they see that this thing that isn't fully working and it could be a lot better. And they believe and understand that blockchain technology is ultimately the solution to that. So it's a place that they see value and a place that they want to be able to participate and want to make progress together.
Got it. So those institutions, let's just say, compare my old institution before I got into crypto was AIG, right? And I'm going to dive a little bit into technical details. One of the things that people used to do when I worked in IT, I was a project manager, was different areas of the company would purchase platforms. They would like no one gave them authorization. They didn't do it. We didn't do an assessment first. Oh, we just bought this thing. Can you implement it? That still happens today in a lot of companies where they buy this thing that no one knew about or understand. Like, so that decision-making process in the technology area is really the back end. How do we get, and maybe Centrifuge can help with this, how do we get the technology to be part of the upfront decisions so that they can come in and then join Web3 more seamlessly and have solutions for the business more seamlessly? How do they do that from a technical perspective?
Yeah, it's a really hard question, I would say, right? I think what really helps is that I think in DeFi, making the right technology choice is ultimately what unlocks all the other benefits of DeFi. And what I mean by that is, right, like, what is the ultimate, like, I think what is kind of the benefits of DeFi is it's about, like, being able to easily take a token and use that in these composable markets, use it on Morpho, use it on Uniswap, use it on Aave, use it on all the different protocols. But if you make the wrong technical choices, you're not going to be able to actually use that. So you can tokenize something and put it on chain, but then actually not be able to interact with the wider DeFi system. So I think that's it's going to be pretty clear, I think, for institutions to see that, like, choosing the right technology partner and making the right technology choices is much more important in Web3 than it is in Web2. So I think that will be a pretty strong incentive to, on a, like, more top down, making the right decision, basically. Beyond that, I think it's a hard problem. I think it's about how do technology players like us collaborate with institutions and make sure the right decisions are made. And it's something that we're thinking about every day. And I think it's something that we're gonna, like, learn over time how to best handle that.
Great. Because what I noticed when I first came into crypto was, okay, we built the solution, and then, like, companies come, like, you're going to implement it the way we build it, and I'm like, there's more collaboration, like you said, there's more conversations that need to happen, right? So what are some of the considerations in those conversations?
Yeah, and I mean that's where I think it's really exciting when you see institutions really partner and collaborate, right? So for example, we work very closely with a major asset manager called Janus Henderson. They're a very old, like, 400 billion in AUM asset manager, and that has like a huge amount of experience in traditional financial markets. And it's been incredibly great to see how they really adopted this perspective that they need to be ready for the move to blockchain technology, and they really need to be in that game, and they really need to be collaborating with us. And so it's really about, like, what we've learned is it's about having the right buy-in from the institution and working with the right people in those organizations. And so that's, like, for us, it's been an example where it can work really well if you're talking to those right people and if they have the right incentives. And if you do that, like, it very much is a 1+1 is 3 situation where, like, they bring all of the experience, we bring all of the technology know-how, and together we can actually learn and build new products and build something better. And like you say, like, build something useful, not just build, like, a solution for a problem that maybe does not exist, but actually, like, listen to the institution and listen to their problems and understand what it is that they need and then build for that. So I think that's really the answer, right? Like, it's about finding the right partner and finding the right way to partner with that organization.
Got it. So, I'm trying to see a path forward here for blockchain. I mean, there's lots of paths, right? I see, like, AI agents. I see, meme coins. Well, that's for more for retail, right? I see, stable coins are supposed to be something important, but anywhere there where you're competing with the banking cabal, I'll call it cabal, right? Might be using the wrong word. There's friction. I see less friction with RWAs. So how can we assure people, like, how can we assure people in other segments that there's not that the friction that crypto blockchain is useful? And I see a blue ocean for the RWAs. So I want to see what you think of that, and how do you see it too?
I think it all goes hand in hand, right? Like, I think we wouldn't have most of DeFi today if we didn't have all the experiments with NFTs and meme coins. Like, all of that, like, everything that happened in the last 8 years has helped the technology to evolve. Very similarly today, I mean, stablecoins and RWAs absolutely go hand in hand, right? Like, you could see stablecoins and, like, the financial cabal as being opposites. But in many ways, like, I think they're very incentivized to work with us on RWAs and, like, become involved in that market. And the reality is, like, RWAs don't work without stablecoins because you need a way to settle payments, you need a way to on and off ramp if you're going to be able to buy something in the real world. So I think the growth of stablecoins will ultimately help the growth of RWAs, and the growth of RWAs vice versa will help the growth of stablecoins. And I think because those two are so interlinked, it also means institutions will ultimately be incentivized to help the growth of the overall market and not just, like, their own share of the pie. And I think that's where there's also a bit of a fundamental difference between Web2 and Web3. And what we see now is, right, I'm not saying there won't be competition, but I think the interesting point about DeFi is that there's so much more value being created for everybody if we all collaborate, right? Like if we all use the same standard, like if we all use, by everybody using ERC20 as the token standard, DeFi is much more stronger for it, right? Like if 50% of the market had decided to use another token standard, I would have made DeFi much weaker. And I think the point I'm trying to make there is if like ultimately all of these institutions partnering and like working together and creating standards and collaborating to grow the pie of DeFi will grow each of their individual, I mean, top line revenue ultimately. And so that's I think an incentive structure that helps everybody.
Got it. So you mentioned this twice, and now I have to ask about it because you're going to have some people who disagree with you. You said Ethereum should be the standard. I would guarantee you that the Solana people and the Bitcoin people are going to heavily disagree with you. So how do you gain, and maybe there's some way that all three people from all three chains could work together for a multi-chain world, right? How do you get the buy-in and collaboration from competition?
Yeah. So I mean the main thing I was referring to is ERC20 as a token standard being the main like standard that everybody uses on Ethereum. I actually absolutely, I completely agree that clearly the future is multi-chain. And we're going to start to see like different markets pop up in different like blockchains. I don't think I think that's inevitable, but at this point, like clearly Solana has many great properties that Ethereum doesn't have, and so it's going to have different users in different markets. Um, I think what you do need is some level of standardization. So that's more about like if you have a token on Ethereum and you also want to have that token on Solana, how do you bring those two together? And so that's a problem that a lot of teams are working on solving, and I think it's going to be solved. Maybe it's already pretty close to being solved, to be honest. There's also next steps to that, right? So I'm actually involved with a group working on standardizing with the security tokens on Solana. And so I think there's a lot of efforts in that, and I think that is clearly going to be the way to go. Like collaborating on standards and bringing this together. I think it's not about like Solana versus Ethereum. It's about how do we connect these different chains.
Got it. And each different chain does things well. So how to design that layout of what does well and where should it go? It's going to be a thing, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where you'll start to see ultimately a free market, right? Like you'll start to see like certain benefits in different places, and you'll start to see institutions also kind of deciding where they want to focus their efforts based on that. So I think it's a game that hasn't ended, right? Like we have to see how it evolves, and I mean ultimately who's going to win, because there will be winners and losers, but that's not like there's no. I can make technical arguments for why I think one thing is better than the other, but ultimately it's about like a market developing and seeing like how that evolves.
Got it. Makes sense. So I want to return back to something you mentioned a couple times too. You said tokenizing private credit, right? I know a little bit about the private equity markets and a little bit about the hedge funds, but I'm not too familiar with private credit. What's the future of tokenized private credit, and how can Centrifuge help build out a robust tokenized private credit market?
Yeah, so I think private credit is really interesting because it is in many ways kind of the backbone of like the business markets in the real world, right? Like for any business to start up, you generally need a loan. For any person to get a house, you generally want to get a mortgage. And so all of these are ultimately loans that are either going to be funded by a bank, or it's going to be funded through what you would normally call private credit. The challenge with private credit is that if you look at it, how it works today in traditional finance, it's a very opaque market. So if you want to try and buy private credit funds like today, it's going to be quite hard. There is some ETFs, but they're quite limited and doesn't really give you access to everything. So it's a very opaque market. It's also a very inefficient market, and there's better people that can talk to this, but really what it looks like is you have all of these different loans that someone is giving out. They want to then kind of package those loans and like resell that as a single fund token. To do that, you need generally like 10 to 15 different like service provider that you work with. Generally, it's only really feasible when you do that at least above $100 million as a fund, which is quite a lot of money. And generally, you're going to be paying somewhere between 1% and 2% on like the money in the fund, just on fees, just on service providers, just on people like lawyers, people writing spreadsheets, and all of these kind of processes that basically 95% of which could be automated. And so we see as blockchain as kind of a pretty good solution for this, because ultimately it's about like taking those individual loans, tokenizing them directly on chain. So you have like an on-chain representation, managing the entire process of those loans directly on chain as well. So managing who's the end user, what should they take out, what is the interest that they need to pay, and so on. And then bundling those together and like creating a single token that represents like an investment in that portfolio of loans. And so it's an example where there's a lot of inefficiencies. It clearly needs to change. Blockchain, from a technical perspective, is a really good fit. It's the market is maybe it wasn't ready for it yet a few years ago. I think now it's getting closer, where it's getting really interesting. It's getting really to be quite a unique opportunity, and I think it's something where we'll start to see a lot more adoption in the next few years. And definitely where Centrifuge, ultimately, like our role is trying to build this technical layer and then find strong like, private credit issuers, institutions to work with that bring that expertise again of like how do we build a product that actually solves this problem? Like how do we avoid the trap of building something that no one's going to use, but how do we like really solve what they need?
Got it. That makes sense. That makes sense because I mean you said it earlier that things like meme coins and NFTs, people not everybody launched on their own. I know people who launched on OpenSea and different platforms, but they're not going to use their own platform to launch RWAs, right? So why should they go with Centrifuge above everybody else? Why are you guys great?
Yeah, so a few things. One, we have a lot of experience, especially we were talking about multi-chain earlier. I think this is going to be an even bigger part of the story in the next few years. Clearly, if you're an institution, you're not going to want to launch just on Ethereum mainnet. You're going to want to access liquidity on Solana or Base or Arbitrum or Avalanche or wherever your users might be. And so that's one thing that we're really focused on is building a product that's natively multi-chain. What that means is like an issuer could come to us, launch like a token, manage that from one blockchain, but actually get liquidity on all these other blockchains. And that's a pretty unique part where with basically every other solution, they need to manage the overhead of all the different chains, which as a crypto user, I mean, I personally get confused about like all the different wallets and all the different gas tokens and like what it's complicated, right? And so abstracting that away and building a simple UX for multi-chain tokenization is something that we've really honed and really focused on. Beyond that, like coming back to the Launchpad discussion, we've really focused on building this platform of this set of extensions that allow you to like plug and play and build your own products, but it also allows you to build on top, right? So as an institution, there's a lot of things that likely you can already take from what we've built, but probably you want to build like your own specific product as well, right? Like for your own specific use case. And we're really focused on making that super easy. So you can take those building blocks, but you can also extend it and build your own custom use case. And I think that's really where we're quite different from most of the others, and really excited to kind of see what that can enable.
Sounds exciting to me. Yeah, that's great. So user experience has been a problem, and I'm glad teams are working on improving that because that's always been a challenge, right? So
Yeah, and just imagine, right? Like an institution coming in, no crypto experience, and telling them like, well, you need to manage a gas token on every chain. You have different RPC nodes. You have like different kinds of wallets. I mean, you can just imagine that their faces, right? Like it's just not. They're gonna say, well, I mean, then we need a different custodian platform on every single blockchain, and it just adds up and up and up. And if we think about like growth of crypto, I think most people are agree that institutions are a major part of that. But we're not gonna get institutions to really use this product to really integrate with crypto if they have to like sit to that kind of UX. Like this is a problem we need to solve. And so this is the reason we focus so much on this.
awesome. Well, sounds great to me. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. I enjoyed speaking with you. I have one last question. It's easy. It's how can people find out more information about you, about Centrifuge? How can they become clients? How can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you can follow us on Centrifuge or so at Centrifuge on X basically, or centrifuge.io is our website. And yeah, excited to speak to more people about it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much.